Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this video that I found to be very particularly interesting. And I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to title this video. I usually overall put a little bit of a title relating to a fighter in order for my videos to get a little bit more views. And of course, it usually is somewhat related, of course, overall to the title. I don't usually mislead with my titles. At least I personally think so. But anyways, this video, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to label it as. Because honestly, I've been trying to do a video where I review a video by this guy for a very long time. Or, I shouldn't say very long time, but, maybe about a month. Especially overall recently after certain events. I believe that I ended up seeing a video by that of the IBFP, which isn't a channel that I tune into all that much, but every once in a while. I've seen the IBFP, I believe, mention this channel, called Johnboxing P4P the best. And of course, as you see right there, there are lines in the background, which means more than likely that he identifies with the Lions Den boxing community, also known as the LDBC, which once again is pretty much a super pro-black cult agendist group. It just is what it is. And I know that certain people overall that, they're going to get offended by that. It is what it is. Listen, what I'm going to state really quickly is that I, of course, think that it's a great thing. That's, there are certain channels out there, even with the LDBC and new media, that, of course, are trying to support black fighters and give great emotional, overall and logical support. I guess I really shouldn't say too much logical support because honestly, I don't find a lot of these guys to be logical, but at least they give a lot of support to other black fighters out there and black men and black athletes out there. I think that that's a great thing. I do think that it's a great thing. But with everything, of course, there is a little bit of an extreme. And unfortunately, I think that when you talk about the spectrum of extremism and overall not being so extreme, or at least, maybe not talking about certain issues that maybe that one would need to, at least certain standards. I think that they go on the extreme of going a little bit too much of the victimization mentality. And unfortunately, a lot of the times it creates a lot of thoughts of alleged racism or certain injustices that may really not even be there in the first place. Now, don't get it twisted. Is that me stating that black fighters, that they don't deal with a lot of double standards that maybe other fighters would not deal with from other certain demographics of fans? No, that's not what I'm stating. But what I'm stating is that at times, a lot of these channels, including Dante's Boxing Nation and Aki TV, a big part of the reason why also they get so pissed off when fighters like Vasily Lomachenko or Canelo or Usyk or Inoue are placed as the number one pound-for-pound fighter is because within their minds, if you don't go according to their agenda, then you're a quote-unquote racist or there's a racial motivation. Now, don't get it twisted. Can there sometimes be a racial motivation for putting a non-black fighter as the number one pound-for-pound fighter? Absolutely. And does old media and ESPN and some of these other people and some other boxing channels, do they do that because they would rather see a non-black fighter as the number one fighter in the world other than that overall of a black fighter? Yes, of course. But we have to talk about certain debates once again in a logical manner. Like if we were to have the current debate about Alexander Usyk and Terence Bud Crawford, Dante's Boxing Nation, of course, I recently just reviewed a video by him where Dante's Boxing Nation was talking about, well, now they're putting Alexander Usyk over Terence Bud Crawford. Right, but listen, at the end of the day, Alexander Usyk has defeated a multitude of A-grade level fighters throughout his career. Certainly AJ Anthony Joshua and also that of Tyson Fury. He was also able to unify two separate weight classes, and he was able to do something that really only Mayweather and Sugar Ray Leonard, in my recent memory, were really ever able to do within the history, which was able to beat a fighter that probably was at least two weight classes bigger than them, if not even a little bit, bigger, at least in terms of the weight when it came down to it. But not only did he beat him in terms of the weight and an A-grade level fighter at that in Tyson Fury, a decently skilled fighter in Tyson Fury for the heavyweight class, but a guy who also out-lengthened him and out-reached him by several inches. So once again, Alexander Usyk deserves a great amount of credit. Now, if you want to debate that Terence Bud Crawford is the number one pound-for-pound fighter, all the power to you. Even in a logical sense, in my view, you have all the debate in the world, all the argument in the world to debate that Terence Bud Crawford is the number one pound-for-pound fighter. But the reason why I like to review a lot of these LDBC and new media channels is not overall just because I think a lot of them can be full of shit, But because a lot of the black fans and a lot of, certain people that may be taking a look at those videos and say, yes, keep speaking up on those discriminations and those injustices. At the end of the day, when it comes down to it, even overall, if you're a black fan, if you state something that they disagree with, they're going to go after you. You have to go along with their code. You have to go along with their narrative, or they're going to call you a sellout. They're going to call you a coon. They're going to call you this. They do not respect your personal intelligence nor your own opinions if it does not align with theirs. And that's why every single time that a black fighter like Shakur Stevenson or Devin Haney or the Charlo brothers or something like that, or Gervonta Tank Davis, when they called Canelo or someone else the #1 pound-for-pound fighter when they were not a black fighter, they called them sellouts, or they said that they were trying to appease to the race fans, because that's the type of narrative that Dante's Boxing Nation and a lot of these guys have to try to make you believe. But anyways, I just thought that this video was very particularly interesting because Johnboxing, of course, is going to be talking about how a lot of people overall, don't like it when apparently black channels put black fighters on their top 10 pound-for-pound list, which is very particularly interesting that he's going to make that point, because a lot of these channels always bitch, moan, and complain about how ESPN and other guys, overall how they are putting certain guys in certain positions. Then what that means is that you believe that ESPN should be held to a higher standard than you, in my personal view. And one could make the point, of course, because ESPN, they are platformed to the whole world, but so are these channels. And at the end of the day, I'm not a boxing channel that has a very big following, but I hold myself to the highest of standards, higher than ESPN, higher than the LDBC, higher than DAZN, higher than anybody. At the end of the day, I hold myself to a standard to where I believe I'm always going to have to be as logical and objective as possible. Does that mean that I'm always going to get it right, or does that mean always that I'm going to state something that you agree with? No, but as long as I'm keeping somewhat of the same standards and I'm trying to be as logical and objective as possible, then I'm doing my job. It is what it is. But anyways, I just thought that this video was very particularly interesting. But let's get straight into it. Let's see what this man has to say.
Okay, so this is the response video, and I just want to make it clear. I'm not doing this whole back and forth with Sean. I'm not doing that. I'm making this video because he said something in this video that I want to point out to you guys, to show you guys that his whole reasons for attacking black people on YouTube is because he wants the public to believe that the black American fighter is underperforming. He wants the public to believe that the black American fighter is at the bottom and has always been at the bottom. That is what he wants the public to believe, and this is why.
Well, I need to know overall why your allegations are like that, sir. And I keep hearing about this new channel overall that I really haven't watched myself. Mr. Sean, whatever the hell his name is, Sean Woods, whatever the fuck this channel is, I would need to know exactly why you're stating that. Because a lot of the times with these guys, when they love to say certain things like that, it's very exaggeratory overall, and they really don't have a whole lot of data or evidence to really support this. It's just pretty much their emotions. Now, once again, don't get it wrong. Is there a lot of double standards? Of course, overall against that of black fighters. Yes, absolutely. But at the end of the day, once again, you're going to have to prove some of your points with some actual evidence, or at least with some very good, coherent, and intelligent points.
He attacked black boxing fans the most. Mind you, when it comes to boxing, whenever Sean talks about boxing, his opinion doesn't matter. Black people here in this community don't care about Sean's opinions.
Right, that's exactly why you're talking about it, and that's exactly why you're reacting to it, because you don't personally care about his opinion. It is what it is. And even me, when you talk about me as a commentator, I have to care overall, at least to a certain degree, about what a lot of these channels are stating. Now, does that mean that I respect overall or that I agree with a lot of these opinions? No, but at the end of the day, the reason overall why I care about a certain amount of these other commentators, whether I tend to disagree with them or whether I think they're full of shit or whatever it may be, is because whoever ends up a lot of the times, and a part of the reason why I liked to start this channel is because there's a saying, whoever ends up controlling the past controls the future. Basically meaning what? that the narrative is oftentimes more powerful than that of the truth. A lot of life and a lot of things overall in general is really about narrative. You can get a certain amount of people to believe certain things just because overall it gets passed on from generation to generation. So once again, a big part of the reason why I like to do these videos is because if I did not do these videos, at least overall, some of the times, there would be a certain amount of people out there believing overall that that some of these fighters like Canelo Alvarez or Naoya Inoue or some of these other guys, that they're just complete hype jobs. I like to put things in their proper perspective, no matter the demographic and no matter the fighter. That is pretty much what I look to be as my job. I like to put things in their proper place, and I like to put history overall in its proper place. I don't like revisionist history. All right, it is what it is. And I don't just do it with that of boxing. I do it with tennis. I do it with basketball. I do it with NFL football. I do it with whatever sport that I watch. MMA, whatever it may be.
When it comes to the sport, whatever Sean thinks about the sport, nobody cares. Nobody cares about Sean's pound for pound list. No one cares about what Sean thinks in regards to the sport. The only time Sean will get a response from one of us is when he targets black people specifically. You see, Sean, he likes to say that black people are insecure. I don't know where he gets that from, but he loves to say that. He says black people...
Probably from people like you. Once again, a lot of these channels, they love to state all this stuff. At the end of the day, these dudes are as insecure as anybody that I've ever seen. Yes, at the end of the day, a lot of the black fans and black channels are very insecure. And of course, growing up with the culture, overall within that of the super liberal, overall, be a victim at all times, type of mentality, of course, how can you blame them? Because basically a certain amount of minorities, but especially a certain amount of black men in general, they're taught to be a victim at all times, not overall just, within their own households, but also by that of people trying to push that agenda, especially from that of the upper elite echelon Caucasians. Overall, that really control that liberal movement. That's why I like Joe Biden, for example, when he states certain things, like for those of you that remember that, when, there was that one black guy, I believe overall, disagreeing with him or whatever ended up happening. And he stated that if you don't agree with me, you're not black. For those of you that think that the liberals, like Joe Biden and all this other stuff, and don't get it twisted, I'm not saying that the conservatives are any better for anybody, especially that of the minorities. But, if you think that the liberals are really out there to help you, they don't truly respect you. They look at you as a complete puppet. They use you as a puppet the whole entire time. They want you to stay in the victimization mentality, and they basically have a lot of those minorities exactly where they want them. So a lot of these guys really are not realizing that, but it is what it is.
Or insecure, which to me doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, to me, it makes a whole lot of sense, and I'll tell you why it makes a whole lot of sense. Because Dante's Boxing Nations and other channels like that, who of course are black boxing commentators, at the end of the day, they bitch, moan, and complain about how Canelo or Lomachenko or other certain fighters, overall, how they can be the #1 pound-for-pound fighter, and why are you disrespecting our champions? Why are you disrespecting our black champions? And then when they make a pound-for-pound list that also has the same bullshit standards that ESPN or some of these other lists come out with, then they just turn around and basically state, why do you care about our opinion? It's our opinion. It's our own pound-for-pound list. Why do you care? Well, if that's the case, and if we're just going to have a pound-for-pound list based off of opinion, then what are you bitching about other people's standards for? Just put out your own pound-for-pound list and keep it moving forward.
Sean has been doing for over 10 plus years is what an insecure person would do. Complain about somebody else's opinion. You see,
Right, which is what you do. Which is what you do, which is what all the LDBC and new media does. That's pretty much what your whole channel is about. And to be fair, that's also what, I'm not going to state overall that I'm a complainer, but I also like to once again put things in the proper perspective. So if I see things to where the standards don't add up, or if I see double standards, yes, I will talk about it. Because I do have my own certain set of standards. I do overall have my own certain set of expectations. And that's to be as logical and objective as possible. I don't overall bow, to any demographic. I don't overall do any of that shit. I'm here once again to go by a certain set of standards. That's what I do. It is what it is.
People's opinions,
And I'm not here to give any extra points to any fighter just because of a certain demographic or overall just because I like their style more. That's why I like to say within a lot of my videos, I also don't like to be a super huge fan of a lot of these fighters because that would personally ruin my logic and objectivity.
Doesn't dictate anything. Our opinion isn't going to change anything. We're just a fan just like him with an opinion. He calls our opinion pushing narratives. That's what he calls our opinions.
Right, well, that's the same exact thing that you guys say about ESPN and also that of DAZN and all these other pound for pound lists. So if we're just gonna, respect everyone else's opinion, then what do your channels even exist for? Because to be quite honest with you, a big part of the reason why these guys have such a big following in the first place is because they're able to trap overall so many of these minority watchers into the victimization mentality and bitch, moan, and complain about other people's standards and opinions. So once again, it is what it is, and don't get it twisted. Once again, to a degree, it's kind of what I do, at least when you talk about, disagreeing with certain standards and double standards. But at the end of the day, this is why a lot of people find this community, or at least the LDBC and new media, so obnoxious. Because at the end of the day, these guys will bitch, moan, and complain about certain standards that are set for that of black fighters. But at the end of the day, they'll do the same exact thing that they'll state overall that ESPN and all these other guys are doing, or these other fans or channels are doing with that of non-black fighters. It is what it is. And what I'm here to do, with my boxing channel is to set, once again, certain standards. I'm here to create an objective and logical pound for pound list and certain rankings overall, and once again, analyzations and fight predictions. I'm not here to be a fanatic. I'm not here, once again, to be a fanboy. That's not what I'm here for.
You see, when it comes to his opinions, we don't care. We never did. We don't care about his opinion. We never make a response video in regards of his opinion. The only
You have several times, sir. So let's knock it off.
time we'll make a response video is when he attacks us personally. He has a habit of attacking black people based off of our opinions about the sport of boxing. And so, again, he likes to call black people insecure for whatever reason, I don't know. But a person that's insecure will always have something to say about somebody else's opinion.
Right, which is exactly what you do. And don't get it twisted. Just because someone overall says something about another person's opinion, because that is allowed, what my channel is based on, it doesn't necessarily always mean that you're insecure. It just might mean that you like breaking things down, or it means that overall that you want to also set up your own standards, that you want to talk about your personal beliefs or opinions. But if you're always, talking about other people's pound for pound lists and how they're not objective and how they're not that, I don't mind you doing that personally, but then you also better have a very good set of logic and objectivity and standard of rules. The thing is with the LDBC and new media is that they're always the pot calling the kettle black. They love to bitch, moan, and complain about how much racial motivation and racism there is in so many of the pound for pound lists, and they do the exact same thing with their pound for pound list. Even Champside will tell you that a big part of his pound for pound list is him supporting his black fighters. But yet he loves to bitch, moan, and complain about when certain fighters, are not getting the certain respect that they deserve on their pound for pound list. Then how can you have this guy there when there's black fighters that have accomplished this? And I agree with that point. But at the end of the day, if you're going to state that you have black fighters on your pound for pound list just because you want more black fighters on there, how the hell am I supposed to trust your pound for pound list? Or, how overall am I supposed to look at you as any more logical or objective than those other pound for pound lists? You're literally doing the exact same thing that they are. It makes no sense.
A person that's not insecure doesn't give a two F's about somebody else's opinion.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. And the reason why I don't agree with that is because at the end of the day, we will have to address certain people's opinions, or we will have to address certain narratives. At the end of the day, just because, for example, if someone ends up talking about a Michael Jordan versus LeBron James debate, and they state that they believe that Michael Jordan is greater than that of LeBron James, and that the LeBron James narrative in their view is kind of overpushed, does that really mean that they're insecure, or does that just mean that they're stating their opinion? So at the end of the day, just because someone is addressing someone else's opinion, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're insecure. What insecure would mean is that even when something is a little bit logical and explainable, you still have a problem overall with that narrative being afoot.
Don't care about what.
For example, Alexander Usyk or Naoya Inoue right now being debated as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter, or Canelo Alvarez being debated as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter a few years ago when he was very deserving of it, but apparently they're disrespecting black fighters by putting those guys at the #1 pound-for-pound spot. That's a sign of insecurity.
Thinks about the sport. We don't care. We don't care about his pound-for-pound list. We don't care about who he thinks is the best fighter. We don't care. We never did. He cares about what we think. Okay? That is a fact. And so, the point of this video is to show you guys that what I've been saying about this dude for over, 2 years, I stand correct. Because he said that black people put certain black fighters on the pound-for-pound list because of an eye test. He said we base our pound-for-pound list.
Yes, which is very true. And once again, this is not me stating that other channels of other demographics do not do the same thing. But listen, at the end of the day, I've taken a look at certain pound-for-pound lists where Dante's Boxing Nation or Aki TV, who very clearly have racial motivations, where they'll claim that Lomachenko did not deserve to be the #1 pound-for-pound fighter because of resume, that overall that Gennady Golovkin did not have the resume to be as high as what he was in terms of the pound-for-pound ranking, but yet they put Deontay Wilder in their top 5 pound-for-pound, even over AJ Anthony Joshua, when AJ Anthony Joshua clearly had the better resume of the two fighters. I've seen championship lists where they bitched about certain fighters being high on the pound-for-pound list, but yet they had a fighter that had never even won a belt before on their top 10 pound-for-pound list in Jaron Boots Ennis with the Champ Side channel. This is what I've seen. So at the end of the day, you can say whatever you want to, but that is a correct point.
Off some eye test. So in other words, he's basically saying that black fighters are not as accomplished.
And once again, if you're going to put certain fighters like that on your pound-for-pound list, that's up to you. That's your prerogative. Up to you. That's your business. But then don't sit here, bitch, moan, and complain about when other fighters put a pound-for-pound list that is not suitable to you when you're putting fighters on there that haven't even won a belt yet in their career on your top 10 pound-for-pound list. Don't bitch, moan, and complain about it.
In the fighters that he liked, which are non-black fighters. So the fighters that we have on our pound-for-pound list don't belong on the pound-for-pound list. That's what he's pretty much saying. And that is very, very misleading because he's basically saying black fighters are not accomplishing anything. That's what he's saying.
Right, but is he really stating that, or did he state something overall along the lines of they're putting certain black fighters on the pound-for-pound list when really they don't belong there pretty much just because they're black fighters? I would need to state what he personally stated. Now, maybe overall, maybe Sean Woods or whatever the fuck his name is. I don't personally know the dude's channel, but maybe he did state something that, in my view, would have given that thing off. But is that really what he stated, or is this just your insecurity striking again, sir?
And, in his own words, accomplishing something in the sport of boxing is a fighter becoming a world champion. And he's trying to convince the public that black fighters are not doing that. And so he gets mad at black people for putting black fighters on the pound-for-pound list. Okay, which doesn't make any sense.
Well, what I'll say is this. Both ends of the spectrum are going to have to be addressed if we're going to have an objective conversation about a lot of these boxing channels and a lot of the boxing fans. When you talk about the way that black fighters, of course, are disrespected and talked about in a derogatory way, yes, of course, it very much exists. By that of boxing channels and a lot of boxing fans, absolutely. To where a lot of black fighters are called boring, or a lot of black fighters are disrespected, even if they're from their own country, especially from that of America. A lot of American black fighters are booed even in their home stadiums, or even are not home stadiums necessarily, but in their home countries. Yes, it does happen. Floyd Mayweather, Andre Ward, certain guys like that, different demographics from other countries were rooted for overall against those of the elite black American fighters in those fights because they did not want to see the black fighter win. Yes, that's something that's very real. But on the other end of the spectrum, yes, there is a lot of very insecure black boxing channels and black boxing fans that also do the same exact thing that a lot of these other racist or racial fans do. And they put black fighters on their pound for pound list because they really don't have a great reason to in certain situations, even though, of course, there's usually always great black fighters on the boxing pound for pound list. But at times, they will try to make it to where there are more black fighters on that pound for pound list than what they really deserve to be. It is what it is. Examples of this are Dante's Boxing Nation, Aki TV, Boxing Ego, Champside, other channels like that. It's whatever. It's just the truth.
Because the fighters that we put on our pound for pound list have accomplished a lot. Terrence Crawford, unified at 135, undisputed at 140, undisputed at the welterweight division. Okay, he's on our pound for pound list. Isn't that an accomplishment? Devin Haney.
Right, but is he stating that Terrence Bud Crawford shouldn't be on the pound for pound list? Is that what he was stating? Or what was he necessarily stating?
Undisputed at 135, a world champion at 140, and he's not even 25 years old yet. Isn't that an accomplishment?
And when you talk about black American fighters or black fighters right now that deserve to be on the pound for pound list, just in my personal view, and I always rank things off of a logical and objective basis. I don't rank them off of anything else, at least overall, with my mains, mine. I'm sure that, we all have our biases, like I said, because it depends on your demographic, your age range, and, what styles that maybe you prefer or which fighters you see as more particularly skilled, and also the level of competition that you believe that they have faced. But, once again, when you talk about the black fighters that, in my view, legitimately deserve to be on the pound for pound list right now, in my view, of course, you're talking about Terrence Bud Crawford. You're talking about Shakur Stevenson. Maybe Gervonta Tank Davis. He may have a debate there. I just don't know if he quite has the resume as some other fighters to be on that list. Devin Haney, of course, was formerly on that list, but I'm not really quite sure where to put him after that Ryan Garcia fight.
Jermell Charlo, undisputed junior middleweight champion. Isn't that an accomplishment?
But right now, the fighters that I would for sure have on my pound for pound list, right now, within the top four, you certainly have to have Alexander Usyk, Terrence Crawford, Naoya Inoue, Canelo Alvarez. That would for sure be my lock for a top four in no particular order. After that, you're talking about fighters like Dmitry Bivol or Bivol, however you pronounce his name, the Russian. You're talking about Artur, who of course is another Russian. So you're talking about a fighter that I believe would probably be identified as somewhat of an Asian European fighter within that of Dmitry Bivol. You're talking about Artur, who would be another Caucasian. That's the top 6 pound for pound right there. Shakur Stevenson, probably another one, top 7 pound for pound right there. And then after that, it might get a little bit murky because Devin Haney still could potentially be on there, but he can't really be within my top 5 anymore, like what he debatably was last year. Tyson Fury can no longer be on my top 10 pound for pound list after that loss to Alexander Usyk, in my personal view. Teofimo Lopez is debatably there because he got that win over Josh Taylor last year, but in my view, he also should have lost his last fight against Jermaine Ortiz. So it's a little bit, muddy in the waters right now in terms of who probably would be in the final 3 pound per pound. I'm not really sure. You could debate fighters like Gervonta Tank Davis, maybe Vasily Lomachenko, maybe some other fighters. I'm not really quite sure who all would be there. Janibek. Janibek would probably be more like top 15 to top 20 just because I don't think that he quite has the resume. But there might be some other fighters out there as well. Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, he might be debatably there, especially if he's able to beat Juan Francisco Estrada. If he's able to beat him, and especially dominantly, he is going to be on my top 10 pound per pound list. There might be some other fighters that I'm forgetting.
Boxing, he lost to Canelo. He lost to Canelo Alvarez 2 weight divisions north. He went up 2 weight classes.
Well, Jermell Charlo ended up losing to Canelo Alvarez when they both really are probably more natural middleweight fighters. Now, did he move up 2 weight classes because Canelo is more used to fighting at 168? Yeah, that's a point that is something that's valid. But in terms of, people stating that Jermell Charlo was at this massive size disadvantage, to me, that was never really quite as much of an excuse because Jermell Charlo was a dude that clearly could fight at 160, and Canelo's not really a natural 168 pounder anyway.
Lost. There's no shame in that. But he was still undisputed in his own weight class. Isn't that an accomplishment? Because that's what got Usyk on the pound for pound list before he moved up to the heavyweight division, becoming undisputed.
Right, but here's also the issue. And people, of course, they love to take a look at this comparison and they love to say that, well, you know, this guy did this, you know, so how come it's not placing this? Well, you would also have to see that that's a similar situation. And when you talk about Usyk unifying that of the cruiserweight class, first of all, Usyk was always an exceptionally skilled fighter. Jermell Charlo is a very good skilled fighter. He's not an exceptionally skilled fighter, never has been. And that's why he lost to Tony Harrison. People always wonder why Jermell Charlo, why people were a little bit reluctant to put him so high on the pound for pound list, if on the pound for pound list at all. like these same guys, these same LDBC new media channels, they love to always bring up the fact that Lomachenko lost to Orlando Salido in the second professional fight, and then they would basically not talk as much about the wins that he got over Rigondeaux and Gary Russell Jr., but they would always bring up the fact that that he lost to Orlando Salido. Dude, Jermell Charlo ended up losing to a dude in like his 30th professional fight to a guy that had never even won a belt before and had gotten knocked out twice in his career in the two biggest fights of his life. At the end of the day, they never brought that up.
You see, Jermell Charlo and Devin Haney, when they became undisputed, they wasn't on anybody's pound for pound list but ours.
Absolutely not true. Devin Haney, once he became undisputed, was pretty much on everybody's pound for pound list, especially ESPN and Ring Magazine. Absolutely not true whatsoever. Once Devin Haney became undisputed, he was pretty much on everybody's top 10 pound for pound list. Now, if you want to mention Jermell Charlo, that is something overall that you can mention. In my view, he wasn't on my top 10 pound for pound list either. Jermell Charlo, that is. Devin Haney was.
We got shamed for that because
no offense, but that 154-pound unification, that was one of the weakest unification runs that I had personally ever seen. No offense. It's like, who all did Jermell Charlo really beat? I mean, Brian Castano overall was a decent little fighter. I really don't even know how good Brian Castano actually is. But other than that, Jason Rosario, you know, who's really a B-grade level fighter, you know, really, if that, to be quite honest with you, you know, who else did he really beat in order to get there? Erickson Lubin. He lost to Tony Harrison in one of those fights. It's like, no offense against Jermell Charlo, but debatably out of any other undisputed run, that might be the weakest and most unimpressive undisputed run in my personal view out of any other undisputed run, compared to Crawford, compared to Usyk, compared to Canelo, compared to pretty much anybody else.
People like Sean don't want black fighters to be seen as being the best fighters in the sport of boxing. He didn't care that Ring Magazine and, you know, ESPN and BoxRec didn't have Jermell Charlo and Devin Haney on the pound for pound list. When Deontay Wilder...
Right, so when did Ring Magazine not have Devin Haney on the pound for pound list when he ended up becoming undisputed? Now, I would have to take a look and see overall how true that actually is, but I'm having a hard time believing that Devin Haney was not on the top 10 pound for pound list on Ring Magazine when he became completely undisputed in that weight class, or especially after he potentially defeated Vasily Lomachenko, or at least ended up winning that fight. I'm having a hard time believing overall that Devin Haney was not on that pound for pound list. Now, if you want to talk about BoxRec, then yes, that's fine. But BoxingRec overall has one of the worst ranking systems that personally has ever existed in all the sports. I really don't take them seriously whatsoever.
Made all those title defenses for his WBC belt. Isn't that itself an accomplishment? Because Sean didn't acknowledge Deontay Wilder making all those title defenses.
Well, this is the thing that we also need to talk about here. Because how good are title defenses if we're not really going to be facing that great of competition? Because these, you know, no offense against these guys, but these pro-blackity-black channels, you know, they always love to bitch, moan, and complain about how Deontay Wilder and Gary Russell Jr. and all these black fighters are not getting any respect for defending their titles. Right, so where were you guys when Gennady Golovkin had the most amount of middleweight title defenses of all time? So are you guys going to be there screaming at the mountaintop that, hey, you know, we black fans, you know, we black people, we got to stop disrespecting Gennady Golovkin because he has the most amount of middleweight title defenses of all time? Once again, I don't mind you overall stating that, you know, we need to give credit to Wilder and these other black fighters that have these great amount of title defenses because that's a great accomplishment. Right, no problem. Give the same credit to Gennady Golovkin and some of these other fighters.
Because he hated Deontay Wilder.
And if you're not going to do that, then no problem. But then don't bitch, moan, and complain and state overall how black fighters have to go through all these injustices when you're going to do the exact same things to overall, you're not your own demographic. Is what it is.
He said the fighters that Deontay Wilder fought were all bums. But he gave high praises to Gennady Golovkin for making all those title defenses to a second-tier belt.
Right, absolutely, and I certainly agree with you. Gennady Golovkin did not face a whole lot of A-grade level fighters when you talk about his middleweight reign. But this is why it also needs to be discussed, because Gennady Golovkin and Deontay Wilder, depending on the channel, they're talked about in completely different realms, depending on who you prefer. Now, would I say that Gennady Golovkin, of course, is a greater fighter than Deontay Wilder? Yes, absolutely I would. But when you talk about Gennady Golovkin's middleweight reign, of course he had a great amount of middleweight defenses, but it's not like he was facing repeated A-grade fighter after repeated A-grade level fighter. It's not like Marco Antonio Rubio or Daniel Geale or or some of those other guys were complete A-grade level fighters. Now, did he defeat some very decent fighters? Absolutely. He defeated David Lemieux. He defeated Danny Jacobs, which probably was the biggest win of his career. I also thought that he personally should have got the win over Canelo Alvarez in the first fight. But at the end of the day, once again, I do agree. Gennady Golovkin was not a dude, once again, that in my view had a whole lot of competition in the middleweight division other than a few fighters. I do agree with that. But what also needs to be discussed is that Deontay Wilder, if you're going to go along with that narrative, I have no problem with it. But then we also need to keep the same standards along with that of Deontay Wilder. Because no offense against Deontay Wilder, but Deontay Wilder, other than fighting Luis Ortiz and beating Luis Ortiz, who the fuck did that dude ever really beat in his WBC title defenses? No one's going to give a fuck about Chris Arreola or Archer Sputsko or Juan Duapas or Bermain Stavern. No one cares about those guys.
Belt that Gervonta Davis gets criticized
or Dominic Breazeale
for having.
Like, at least what I'll state about Gennady Golovkin is this. At least he was fighting his top 10 guys. Like, I'm not really even quite sure how many top 10 guys, when they were ranked in the top 10, that Wilder defeated. Maybe Breazeale, maybe definitely Luis Ortiz. Maybe Breazeale, definitely Bermain Stavern, at least for the first fight. Probably Dominic Breazeale. To be honest with you, that really might be about it.
But he can't list one name that Gennady Golovkin beat to make a title defense for that second tier belt. But see, the WBC belt, that's a recognized belt. And Deontay Wilder made a lot of title defenses for that belt. What was it, 10?
Well, I mean, I'm not really quite sure what he's talking about. Maybe Gennady Golovkin won an IBO title a little bit later on. I'm not really quite sure what he's talking about. But as long as Gennady Golovkin had one of the 4 official titles, whether it be the IBF or the WBC or WBA or WBO, that's a recognized title. It is what it is. Now, if he's talking about an IBO title potentially, where I don't necessarily remember, then I could maybe see where he's coming from.
But see, that's not an accomplishment for Sean because Deontay Wilder is black. But see, real boxing fans acknowledge that. They acknowledge Deontay Wilder making all those title defenses.
Well, it's a great thing that Deontay Wilder had those title defenses. The question is that where do you really deserve to be ranked in terms of the history and your current, overall ranking amongst your peers and amongst your contemporaries and your other competitors in terms of those titles defenses? Where should Deontay Wilder really be ranked? Should he really be ranked as one of the greatest heavyweights of all time because he had 10 title defenses? Is Gennady Golovkin going to be remembered as these guys as the greatest middleweight of all time because he has the most amount of title defenses? I mean, to be honest with you, you could debate it potentially because Gennady, of course, was greatly talented. And of course, overall, he won a great amount of titles there, So, I mean, of course, you could possibly debate it. But you know that these guys aren't going to debate that. So is Deontay Wilder really going to be a guy to where, we can claim all this stuff about, oh, it's a great accomplishment, right? But here's the question. Where does Deontay Wilder deserve to be ranked? Because we all know that if Gennady Golovkin was ranked over Marvin Hagler, that there'd be a tizzy fit from a lot of these guys and that they would go along the narrative that Gennady Golovkin is disrespecting Marvin Hagler or that a lot of these guys are disrespecting a black fighter in Marvin Hagler. Right, so if Deontay Wilder then is put, say, for example, over Vladimir Klitschko or something like that, or Vitaly Klitschko, because maybe he has more title defenses, at least, for that of Vitaly Klitschko potentially. Does that mean that Deontay Wilder, just because he didn't face the greatest level of competition, that now it's disrespecting Vitaly Klitschko, or are you not going to give a shit because Vitaly Klitschko is not a black fighter?
And that's what pissed Sean off, because he doesn't want black fighters to be seen as being the best. And this is why he attacks black people that acknowledge black fighters. You see, when we put black fighters high on the pound for pound list, in Sean's eyes, that's black people acknowledging black fighters too much.
Well, is it really that, or is it black fighters being placed on the pound for pound list when they don't have the resumes or nor the accomplishments to really be that high in the pound for pound list? Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this guy, maybe he's complaining about Crawford not deserving to be in the conversation as the #1 pound for pound fighter. Maybe he's talking about Shakur Stevenson, how he shouldn't even be there. I don't know. Personally, I haven't watched the channel. But once again, I need to state exactly what he means.
And he doesn't like that at all. He does not like that one bit.
When you can tell that a bias comes in is when you can tell that a fighter or a certain particular athlete that they have a great debate and they still don't want to possibly even accept the notion. That's how you can tell that Dante's Boxing Nation and Aki TV, that a lot of these guys are so full of shit because they don't even want to try to accept the notion that Inoue or Usyk right now could potentially be the #1 pound for pound fighter. Now, if you want to state that Crawford is the #1 pound for pound fighter, that's up to you. But at the end of the day, Inoue and Usyk are both also undisputed in 2 separate weight classes. And to be honest with you, it's not like Crawford has this super deep resume. He pretty much has the same resume as a Usyk or that of an Inoue. To be honest with you, you pretty much could debate out of any of those fighters who has potentially the better resume out of some of those fighters. And right now, to be honest with you, it might be that of Alexander Usyk. Really to be real with you. You know, but if you were to tell those guys that, they'll state that, oh, you know, people are only doing that because of racial things. Well, right, but here's the question. Are you not even accepting that as a possible conversation? Because that's a conversation that does need to be had. You know, at the end of the day, Usyk versus Crawford right now, or Inoue right now, is a legitimate debate when you talk about who's the #1 pound for pound fighter right now. But right now, what they'll try to tell you is that Crawford is the complete, undisputed #1 pound for pound fighter by whatever rules. Now, is there such a thing as an undisputed #1 pound for pound fighter? Absolutely. At one point in time, Manny Pacquiao was. At one point in time, Floyd Mayweather Jr. was. At one point in time, you can kind of claim that Andre Ward was. Maybe even Crawford, of course, when he defeated that of Errol Spence Jr. and Inoue did not do what he recently did. And Usyk, of course, did not do what he recently did. But the thing is about Terrence Bud Crawford is that him not being claimed ever as the undisputed #1 pound for pound fighter, to be honest with you, a lot of that is really not really racism. It's really because Crawford really just does not have that deep of a resume. It is what it is.
Shakur Stevenson, isn't he a 3-division world champion? Last time I checked, he is. Isn't that an accomplishment? It is. So I don't know what Sean is talking about when he says that black fighters should not be on the pound for pound list based on the eye test. I don't know what he's talking about.
Well, to me, that's a pretty simple thing. Basically, what he's stating is that black fighters or certain fighters overall, that they shouldn't be put on the pound for pound list overall, at least by some of these channels that love to do that because they're supporting their own demographic, but in a way that's probably a little bit too emotional, purely based off the eye test. And if we're talking about that, I have to completely agree. And not just within the sport of boxing, but also within that of every sport. For those of you, of course, that have ever watched my videos, you know that I've done football videos in the past, and probably the most player that I've ever talked about has been that of Aaron Rodgers. And the reason why I talk about Aaron Rodgers is because this dude was always based off the eye test. Every single year he would come in as the #1 quarterback. Every single year he was looked at as the #1 ranked dude within the NFL. Every single year there would always be some sort of excuse for why he was not winning championships or even making a second Super Bowl appearance. People always try to put him over Tom Brady, even though Tom Brady or other quarterbacks right now like Patrick Mahomes would have more success within that of the playoffs. And they tried to always make excuses and say how valuable Aaron Rodgers was. And he is very valuable. He's an all-time great player and an all-time great quarterback. Was he overrated throughout his career? Yes, he was, at least in terms of his impact, because he can never even make a second Super Bowl appearance when he should have been able to make it there a second time, at the very least. So it is what it is. So I agree, you cannot completely put someone overall over somebody who is more accomplished and more of a winner throughout their career just based off the eye test. That has to be agreed upon, at least in my personal view. You know, and if you don't agree with that, no problem. But then don't sit here and expect me to take your list seriously.
Because these fighters that I mentioned, you know, they're not just passing an eye test. These guys are actually doing something in the sport of boxing.
Well, that would be your best point. When we talk about rankings, when we talk about putting someone within proper rankings, at least in my personal view, we can't just take a look at eye test. We have to take a look at accomplishments. We have to take a look at resume. We have to take a look at championships. We have to take a look at the whole package, not just one or two qualities.
Errol Spence Jr., before he lost to Terrence Crawford, wasn't he unified? Wasn't he the
Well, he was somewhat unified, but he wasn't ever completely unified.
unified world champion? And I believe that he was the longest reigning champion, if I'm not mistaken, because he had the IBF belt since 2017. And he lost it 2023. So isn't that an accomplishment? I believe it is. I strongly believe it is. But according to Sean, that's not an accomplishment. That is Errol Spence.
Well, it depends, once again, whether Sean is stating that some of these fighters do not deserve to be on the pound-for-pound list. If you're talking about that, then yes, I would personally agree with you that that's a racial motivation, and that's something that's a little bit bogus to state. But did he state that these fighters didn't deserve to be on the pound-for-pound list? Or did he state that certain pro-black channels overall, they're placing certain black fighters higher on the pound-for-pound list overall than what they actually should be because they have a racial motivation? Which one do you think overall that he actually truly said?
Some eye test. Listen, at the end of the day, you know, a lot of these dudes like Sean are too much of a coward. And I'm going to call him a coward because he is a coward, to admit why he always degrade black fighters. He attacks black people all the time. He makes response videos, you know, about black boxing fans' opinion. And there's a reason why he does that.
Right, sir. So what that must mean is that on your boxing channel, that there also must be responses to 78 Sports TV and other channels, especially within that of the LDBC and new media. That's what that must mean, right, sir?
It's almost, you know, like he's trying to shoot the messenger.
But anyways, that pretty much is about it for this video. I just wanted to talk about that because I thought that it was very particularly interesting. But anyways, pretty much, thank you all so much for watching. I thought overall that this was a very interesting video to review because oftentimes certain people wonder why I like to review the LDBC and new media. And it's not just because I like to put things in their proper perspective, but oftentimes in my view, I don't think that the LDBC and new media, I don't think that what they're doing, I don't think that it's necessarily the worst idea in terms of supporting black fighters because there is a lot of bad narratives and in my view unfair storylines or, you know, kind of double standards against that of black fighters. I don't think that, you know, having your own type of media, especially for black fighters, is a bad thing whatsoever. But once again, I think that they go a little bit too extreme, and I think that they have a very similar racial and racist motivation, pretty much what a lot of these other fans and other channels do as well. So to me, it really doesn't make much of a difference. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.